Howdy, my name's Brian Foley. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I'm the managing partner here at Houston Criminal Defense Attorneys PLLC. Today we're going to be talking about breath test cases, and that means we're talking about DWI, driving while intoxicated. Remember, there's three ways to prove that somebody is intoxicated under Texas law. One of them is loss of the normal use of your mental faculties. One is the loss of your physical faculties because of alcohol or drugs. And then the last one is having an alcohol concentration of 0.08 or more. For breath, this is in liters, of your breath. Okay, so how does one of these breath tests work? Well, if you were to call me on the phone and say, hey, Brian, I just got pulled over, I was arrested for DWI, and they did a breath test, the first question I would ask you is, where did that breath test take place? If the breath test took place on the side of the road and it was sort of a small breath test instrument, maybe this big, kind of looked like a gun, or like a kind of like a weird taser or something like that, then that's going to be called a portable breath test. And a portable breath test result is not admissible in court. There's a standard under Rule 702 of evidence called the expert standard, scientific evidence standard, and the judge acts as a gatekeeper to any evidence that is considered to be like junk science. Now, these portable breath tests will sometimes be admissible to say, there's the presence of alcohol, there was some alcohol on the person's breath, period, but it's not going to be used for determining what that alcohol number was. Right, so if you're talking about proving somebody intoxicated based on the 0.08 standard, you're not going to be able to use one of these portable breath tests on the side of the road. I normally recommend not participating in the use of any of these breath tests, whether it's on the side of the road or, back at the jail. But sometimes if you've refused all of the tests, you know that you are not going to be over the legal limit. You've had one drink, maybe two over the course of 2 or 3 hours, something like that. That's the only time I would suggest refusing all the field sobriety tests, because you don't want to look intoxicated on video, even just because you have some poor balance issues. People who are overweight aren't supposed to, do these tests either. But so if you refuse those tests, the officer is going to arrest you for those refusals. Maybe, unless you do a breath test. So if that portable breath test is offered to you instead of doing the field sobriety test, and you're not going to be intoxicated, you're 100% sure of that, then that might be the only time I would suggest doing a breath test. Now, if you're in Montgomery County, just north of Houston, sometimes they will refuse to give you certain options. Let's say you are over the limit, and there's nothing that we find wrong with the blood test or a breath test. If you refuse to give a blood or a breath test, then they will sometimes deny you the opportunity at what's called a pretrial diversion, which is a special type of probation where you can get a case dismissed even if the DA thinks you're guilty and thinks they can prove the case. Sometimes they'll still allow you to get it dismissed. Well, that would be the only other time I would say maybe do a breath test. It's interesting because these breath tests have been around for a long time, and they are now using an instrument called the Intoxylizer 9000. When I first started criminal practice, we were on the Intoxylizer 5000. And to me, that sounded like one of these funny things that you hear like in an old 1950s video with, with the fancy music, instructional videos like, okay, now we're going to put little Billy on the Intoxylizer 5,000 and it's going to spit out a number. So that instrument has a number of ways that you can attack it. First, the thing you'll want to do if you end up going to trial on a blood or a breath test case is you want to subpoena the technical supervisor, and you want to subpoena the records for that breath test instrument for a few months on either side of this incident. That way you can see, was the instrument calibrated properly? There's a reference sample that they keep in this, and it is mixed by a technical supervisor, a human. And is the machine accurately reflecting what that reference sample is supposed to be? So let's say the reference sample is put at alcohol level 0.07. Well, is the instrument consistently testing that alcohol known quantity to be at 0.07, or is it going a little over? Have there been any maintenance issues with the machine? in the last 2 or 3 months before or after. Maybe there was a problem with the instrument and people didn't know until afterwards. So looking at these records is something your defense attorney can definitely do. Anytime you have a breath test, you can get what's called a breath test discovery order. And most judges are willing to sign that. It's a common practice. What else we have about breath tests? So a breath test doesn't necessarily change the offense unless the breath test is over 0.15. So there's a special type of DWI where you get charged for a Class A instead of a Class B, even if it's your first DWI. And the way they can do that is if they can prove that there's an alcohol concentration in your breath, blood, or urine that's greater than 0.15, well, 0.15 or greater. And that's supposed to be at the time of the test. Well, the only way for them to know what your blood alcohol or your breath alcohol or whatever is when they make the charging decision the day that you get arrested. That's if they do a breath test. That's the only instrument that does an immediate result for your alcohol level. So let's say you have been arrested for DWI. If they give you the option to consenting to breath or blood, and you're way over the limit, it may be better for you to consent to a blood test, because they, if you refuse all the tests, maybe they're going to get a warrant. But that might be a better option. Maybe just refuse all the tests, and then they can get a warrant, and then they'll end up with blood because they can't force you to do a breath test. And there's no way for your number to be above 0.15 on the day that they charge you with the offense. You see, because that blood test is not going to come back for 30 days, maybe 2 or 3 months, depending on where the blood test is being done. And they're not going to get an instant result from that. So they're going to have already charged you with the crime before they know what the blood test number is, right? And that could work in your advantage where you only get charged with the Class B, which is a lower offense. If you do that breath test, it's over 0.15, then the DA, especially in Houston, is going to charge you with driving while intoxicated with alcohol concentration at 0.15 or greater. One final thing about how the breath instrument works, and that should be, I think, enough to give you a taste of what these cases are like. So the breath test instrument, how does it actually measure alcohol? Well, it shines a light through your breath, okay? And there's a sensor on the other end. And alcohol is supposed to absorb some of the light. And so the intensity of the light reaching the other end of this instrument is changed and affected by the amount of alcohol. But this company that produces the Intoxylizer 9000 has a proprietary secret coding that they use to determine the results and calibrate the machine. And they don't release that because it's a trade secret. And so even when you have no problems with the reference sample, there's been no issues with the way they administered the breath test, there's been no proof of contamination, there may still be an avenue to argue that these results are not reliable, because if they were, why would this all be a secret? Why wouldn't the government be able to find an instrument that they could show us all of the data and all of the ways that the instrument works? Because at the end of the day, there's no breath test case that ever has gone to trial where the jury understood exactly how the instrument goes from you breathing into it to them spitting out a number. And that is our video today, which is going to be, again, the breath test. If you found this interesting or exciting or helpful, go ahead and click the like button, click subscribe if you're interested in getting more videos from us. We'll catch you next time.